Is Caitlin Clark the best women's college basketball player ever? The answer is obviously no, but it's interesting that we can have this conversation in this day and age where women's college sports have definitely taken a forefront in media, especially with the rise of Caitlin Clark, Don Staley, and all that. But again, when we look at the GOAT conversation, there's definitely a lot of factors that go into it, whether it be accolades, stats, trophies, everything like that, that culminate into the ultimate GOAT. Especially when you talk about college basketball, there's even more factors, whether or not a player leaves early. And then when you talk about women's college basketball, another factor comes in, and that's coverage. And Caitlin Clark has definitely impacted the way we look at college sports in general, whether it be within the men's and women's game. For me personally, she's not the GOAT women's college basketball player. She's definitely the most talented I've ever seen play, and by a long shot, whether it be women's or men's. She's one of the most talented players I've ever seen touch a basketball court in any basketball setting. But when you look at other quote unquote GOATs, there's definitely a conversation to be had about how each of them stack up against each other, whether it's coaching, whether it's the team they're with, whether it's how much they've won, and whether it's in the modern era or not. Personally, my GOATs, I'm going to talk about them in the modern era, in the social media era, in an era where coverage of women's basketball was a lot better than it has been in the past. Personally, for me, I've seen, some of the best basketball players that have come in through the last 10 years go on and do great things in the WNBA. And, I will talk about the Sue Birds and all that, but that's another conversation for another day when you talk about the UConn machine. But for me personally, like the GOATs start with my first players I've ever seen play at Stanford, the Ogumike sisters, under Tara Vanderveer, who just got the record for the most wins in college basketball history, both men's and women's. And I feel like the coverage for that hasn't been as crazy as I've seen it been for, Duke basketball when Coach K did it, and other men's coaches for that matter. You look at the Ogumike sisters, they were people who dominated at different times. Both of them played for 1 year, I believe, together for those Stanford teams, but each of them were both number one picks in the WNBA and ended up being great players in the WNBA itself. I think Chine might have an MVP. I don't know if Erica does, but I know Chine definitely does. So when you look at players like that, it's easy to expect, oh, that's one of the GOATs, what's one of the all-time players. But, they had the wins. I don't think either of them won a national title. Stanford has won a national title, but I don't think the Ogumike sisters won with Tara Vanderveer. But when you think of other titles, personally, I think of Breanna Stewart. Breanna Stewart was so good. I think it's unrealistic to realize how dominant she was at the college level. Literally back-to-back titles for the UConn machine. But when you look at Breanna Stewart, you have to put her GOAT status with an asterisk. Is she the best player because she went to UConn, or did she go to UConn because she was the best player? It's that situation that has to go with a lot of other, WNBA and women's college basketball greats that went to UConn. For me, if you played under Gino Auriemma, you've had to have some level of success at the collegiate level, but you had to have a lot of talent coming in. Personally, for me, the GOAT of all women's basketball, which I guess you could look at Sue Bird, Diana Taurasi, Maya Moore, have one thing in common. They all played at UConn. So you have to look at the UConn players with an asterisk. And, the next great UConn players, Paige Bueckers, is in that conversation with an asterisk in terms of their success and in terms of how they're viewed and the perspective of them post their playing days at the collegiate level. When you look at the real GOAT in terms of what was their impact and how they scored in their stats and their statistical glory, the UConn players have the stats, Breanna Stewart especially. They have the statistical glory, and they have the accolades, and they have the national championships to prove it. For me personally, the last person I saw be as widely viewed as Caitlin Clark is being viewed right now is Sabrina Ionescu. She just recently came out that she's going to be doing a three-point competition during All-Star Weekend against Stephen Curry, and it's interesting that it's a women's player. She was the number one pick for the New York Liberty, has done crazy things with them, and she really revolutionized how the WNBA was viewed and how women's basketball in college is viewed as well. Going to the Oregon machine, she didn't really win a lot. Like, she's someone who has the stats and the accolades, but she doesn't have like the championships to win to back that up. I think she only has 2 regular season championships and 1 Pac-12 tourney championship, and now NCAA championship to go with that. But Sabrina Ionescu was one of those players that you really saw have a spotlight focused on them with her play at Oregon, and she was one of those players that really would have taken NIL to the next level. I'm telling you right now, Sabrina Ionescu would have benefited crazily off of NIL. I think more than any women's basketball player, Caitlin Clark included, would have at the collegiate level. She has all that, and she still, after this, still considered a very big, prominent name in the basketball landscape. I mean, look, she has a signature shoe, and NBA players are wearing her signature shoe, and that's something that should be, applauded, and that's something that I think Caitlin Clark, when she goes to the professional level, and we'll see how she's going to be marketed, because even right now, I think she's great, but she isn't marketed to the best of her ability. We'll see how that translates to the professional level, but Sabrina Ionescu is a trailblazer in that sense. Next up, Caitlin Clark's currently on pace to break this record. Kelsey Plum. Kelsey Plum at Washington was a player that really was a stat patter at best, honestly, but she was a great player. She was a great scorer. I think she was at Washington the same time Markelle Fultz was at Washington. They were both number one picks. I think that might have been the first time that's ever happened in WNBA and NBA history, but she's the all-time leading scorer in the NCAA. Most likely, Caitlin Clark is going to pass her record. She's not someone who's considered a GOAT because her name gets lost of time, because all she is, she's a Las Vegas Aces champion, so she has a championship within the WNBA, and she has all these awards at the collegiate level, but she didn't really win anything. I think they might have made it to the tournament a couple times, but she didn't win anything with Washington, and I think that's why her name gets, pushed back. Plus, it's Washington. Not going to say that a Pac-12 brand can't be, as pushed heavily as any other brand, because technically Oregon is in the Pac-12, and Sabrina Ionescu was there too. But at the same time, she didn't really get the type of exposure that I feel like all the other players, Caitlin Clark and Sabrina Ionescu, are getting because of her lack of success at the accolades and championship level. Because if you really look at these players, Sabrina Ionescu and Caitlin Clark included, they didn't get any coverage their freshman year or even much into their sophomore year. But when they say, oh, wow, there's a player that's really killing it, there's a player that's breaking all these records, that's when they get the coverage. And Caitlin Clark has done that, where she has pushed Iowa into a new level of success where they are breaking records. I'm not going to say that I knew what Iowa was doing before Caitlin Clark. I'm a Big Ten basketball fan. My Lady Lions for Penn State play in the Big Ten. But at the same time, I was not watching Caitlin Clark, and I definitely wasn't watching Iowa basketball before Caitlin Clark was, brought into the fray. But she's breaking records at the attendance level, and Lisa Bluter is doing a great job at coaching her and coaching this team. And it's going to be very interesting to see what they do this year, because I'm not sure if Caitlin Clark is eligible for a fifth year, and I'm not sure she would take it, because this is going to be the number one pick in the WNBA draft. She's making probably a good amount of money with NIL, and she's bringing a lot of exposure, not just to Iowa basketball, but to women's college sports in general. And that brings me to my next point. If I'm here asking, is Caitlin Clark the best player ever at the women's collegiate basketball level, and I'm saying no, what is she good at? What's her relevance? What is going to be her lasting legacy in the NBA, WNBA, basketball, and whatnot? Like, there's going to be other Caitlin Clarks. I'm sorry. That's just what it is. People thought there would never be another Breanna Stewart, and to an extent, in the play style they played in and all that, there probably won't be. People thought there wouldn't be another Brittany Griner. People thought there wouldn't be another Sabrina Ionescu. Here comes Caitlin Clark. There's going to be other Caitlin Clarks. There's going to be other players that are killing it at the collegiate level. But at the same time, what Caitlin Clark is going to do for basketball and women's sports and college sports in general is push it into a new fray where I think she might be the most impactful women's college basketball player ever. And I know that seems weird to say, because there are definitely other players in women's college basketball right now that are doing a lot more in terms of the exposure level, in terms of like the attention they're bringing, and that can be coincided with Angel Reese and Kim Mulkey at LSU. Kim Mulkey is a fantastic coach that is coaching a great LSU team that's going to probably win another national title this year if South Carolina has anything to say about it, but whatever. They're going to be a great team this year. They were a great team last year. They beat Iowa in one of the most watched national championship games ever, not just within men's, but women's as well. So Angel Reese is someone who has become some sort of celebrity outside of her basketball playing. And, she even said that she had to start taking classes online because of all this celebrity. She's in Cardi B videos. She's, in Amazon ads and whatnot. But at the same time, we're asking ourselves, Is this good for sports? It's great for women's sports, but is this good in terms of the type of allure that women's college sports have? People are going to the game to see Angel Reese, but how much of it is because she's playing or whatnot? For right now, from where I stand, every time I see something about Angel Reese, it's something controversial. People are, and not to say that she's a bad player, she's a great player, and not to say that she's a controversial player, but a lot of people love the controversy and a lot of people love stirring the pot when it comes to Angel Reese coverage. We saw the whole Angel Reese versus Caitlin Clark, where we didn't really see a lot from the Caitlin Clark side. And that is interesting because she's not really marketed as that player, but Angel Reese is marketed as a certain type of player. She's marketed in a certain type of way, which is probably going to be harmful in the long run for sports. All that to say is, Kim Mulkey and Angel Reese represent a good side of women's college basketball where we really see a great coach and a great player come together to create success on the court. And Angel Reese, when it's all said and done, is going to be one of the most impactful players at LSU ever. And she already believes that, and she has a point. All that to say, why we've seen more Angel Reese and Kim Mulkey coverage than we've seen Tara Vanderveer coverage this year, and even Dawn Staley coverage this year. South Carolina just beat LSU in one of the best games of the year, and I don't think I've seen Dawn Staley on my timeline, on my For You page, on my Instagram feed as much as I thought I would have, or as much as I've seen her in the past. And not to say that Dawn Staley isn't as marketable as LSU, because Dawn Staley is one of the most marketable coaches and one of the best coaches in basketball, period. What she's done at South Carolina should be studied. She's turned them into a powerhouse, and she's turned them into one of the best programs of all time, women's college basketball. And I think the impact of what she's done for not even just head coaches in women's college basketball, but black head coaches and black women head coaches is just fantastic. She's going to go down as one of the best coaches of all time, and I think she has 2 or 3 more national titles in her wake as well. But what Caitlin Clark is doing for all this is adding a new level of not just controversy, skill, but there's something to be said about a Caitlin Clark highlight being posted on ESPN, SportsCenter, or Barstool Sports, and the comments, which are usually filled with misogynistic men who are saying something, yada, 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 whatever. And you don't really see that as much. Sometimes you see, oh, that's tough. Sometimes you see, oh, that was great, yada, yada, yada. I think what Clark is doing with women's college sports is she's turning it into a thing where, yeah, this is just as entertaining as the men's, if not more. This is a player that is dominating. This is a player that is legitimately feasting on her competition, and it's someone who is playing a step above everybody else. I saw a comment the other day on a Barstool Sports post about Caitlin Clark where they said she might give the Detroit Pistons 30 points. You've seen the memes where it says Detroit Pistons are tanking for, Caitlin Clark. That's an amazing thing to see, because it only just emphasizes the skill is in women's college basketball, and it only emphasizes how good Caitlin Clark is and how good the product that is on the court for women's college basketball is. Caitlin Clark is the best player in women's college basketball, period, and she might not be one of the 4 teams that can win a national title this year. Last year, she carried her team to a Big Ten title, and she carried her team to NCAA title, but at the end of the day, she still might not win a title this year, and she might not win a title in her time at, in the collegiate level and at Iowa. In fact, I think Caitlin Clark, in terms of accolades, doesn't even fit in the GOAT narrative. Not even accolades, but championships. She only has 1 Big Ten 30 trophy. She's never won the Big Ten in the regular season, I don't think, and she made the national title, so she has a Final Four victory, but that's it. So I think for her to be considered an all-time great, yes, she's going to probably beat the record. She's going to be one of those people that is going to be like Kelsey, Plum, like Maya Moore, like Sue Birds, like the Breanna Stewarts, where they're at the top of the scoring charts all time, and she's going to be probably Iowa's best player that has ever touched, their court. I know Luka Garza exists, but still, I think Caitlin Clark is better than Luka Garza. She's going to be great. But at the end of the day, she's not going to be an all-time GOAT until she wins. And she's not going to win this year. I really doubt she'll win. All that to say, what Caitlin Clark is doing for women's college basketball is not just shifting the narrative of how, players are viewed, but it's shifting the narrative on how the product on the court for women's college basketball is at the best it's ever been, and it's only going to go up from here. I just watched my Lady Lions put the beat down on the University of Maryland, and Asha Owusu, McKenna Marisa were the best players on the court. That is something, and I've watched this team for years, and that is something that I saw that I was like, this is such a good product now, and it's something that needs to be marketed even more. What Caitlin Clark is doing is shifting the narrative from figures in women's college basketball that can, bring in people and bring in, audience members, sell tickets, sell merch and all that. She's changing that narrative from that and changing the narrative to, this is the product on the court. You want to go to this game because it's going to be such a great game. This is going to be one of the best games you see all year, and you're going to see actual talent. And people like Caitlin Clark, Dawn Staley, Tara Vanderveer, Kim Mulkey, and Angel Reese are going to do that. Thank you for watching.